Hello, everyone. This is David Ellis, and I'm here with Dr. Amir Jahangiri for Universal Citizen Media. We have a very special guest on hand, Antonio Arilo. And Antonio is into galactic history, and we're going to have that kind of discussion, that kind of in-depth discussion that everybody would like to have, especially when it comes to galactic history. That does not happen. Okay? So first of all, I'm going to let Amir introduce himself, and I'm going to let Antonio introduce himself as well. Go ahead, Amir.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. My warmest greetings to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a very, very esteemed, important guest, somebody who we were delighted to come into contact with. And the reason for that delight and joy is that we powerfully resonate with all that this incredible gentleman is saying and offering the world. So you're up for a really great treat. If you haven't already heard Antonio speak, you'll be very sure to agree with us that this is an incredible person and the world needs to hear more of what he has to present. So Antonio, welcome to the UCM VIP. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, Antonio, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us how you got into the galactic history and basically just everything that we need to know in terms of what to expect from Sun Consciousness, which is your brand.
Okay, so my journey has been very interesting. I didn't start with the galactic community. I started more with the spiritual community, but even before that, I was in a Christian setting. So I was Christian Pentecostal before I got into anything spiritual. And I was in it for like 15 years. So I was a Bible study school teacher at my local church. And I met some people that had introduced me to the online spiritual community. That was back in, I think, 2014 or something like that. And I met some people that were very psychic. Of course, me coming from a religious background, the Bible is the only truth, with that mentality, and if a perspective doesn't have the name Jesus or the Holy Spirit or attached to a scripture, then it's not true, And so I approached the spiritual community with that mindset, with that indoctrination. So I met some very psychic people that basically, I had a friend who's still my friend now, and she's very psychic. And she basically opened my eyes to a broader way of perceiving our reality, outside of the religious indoctrination. And she basically started telling me things that I never told people about myself. And I was completely freaked out by it, and so long story short, so that initiated me into like a deeper awareness or an expanded awareness of reality as a whole. And that initiated me into this journey of self-searching and understanding who I was, and so it took a lot of years to deprogram from that religious indoctrination. It takes a really long time. But during that process, I began to connect with myself on a much deeper level. I began to have dreams and visions and other psychic awareness of myself on multiple levels, especially multidimensionally speaking. And eventually I branched out into doing energy work, just practicing on certain people that I trusted and who gave me the space to, just give me feedback and just for me to build my confidence with that, because I was never really trained by any modality or anything like that. It was mostly self-taught, I taught myself how to tap into energies, how to wield energies, because I have a background in watching a lot of, animes and video games and stuff. And that really builds a pretty strong template on understanding certain fundamentals of energy, And so I just built on top of that and just kind of used my own knowledge and my own creative ways to really expand myself and just build on top of that. And so I branched out into doing readings and energy clearings of all kinds with people. And then eventually I started tapping into higher dimensional energies, and I started interacting with all kinds of higher dimensional beings and stuff. And then that led me into the galactic community, because I began to have encounters in dream state and also throughout my meditations with different extraterrestrials that at the time I didn't understand that they were extraterrestrials, until I entered the galactic community and I received some understanding, but like, oh, so that's what that was, And so I began communicating with some pretty high vibrational beings like blue avians, Pleiadians, Arcturians, Syrians, and all that stuff. I've even had negative encounters with other ones like Greys and Dracos, and I've battled with a lot of them too. This is something that I do for people. I help them become aware of those kinds of influences, working through others, and also just if they have it around their own field or if they have any past life connection with that too, so I go into all of that with people. And so it just kind of developed where I began to just channel a bunch of different extraterrestrials that wanted to come forward. And I've been doing that for the past year. I did that a little bit last year, but not as much as I did this year, because this is the year that the galactic awakening is the strongest that I've ever felt. And more people are becoming aware of their many different galactic connections and the many different ETs that are actually living among us in human form. And many people are waking up to their own galactic family that have been around them, this whole time. And so that's part of what I do, is help people connect to that, to their extraterrestrial family, so that they can have a deeper understanding of why they're here, because people are here for many different reasons, and a lot of it has to do with their galactic connections. And so in people understanding their galactic connections, they can have a really good idea of why they're here, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So nowadays I'm just working with people with either sessions or courses, or doing, different kinds of interviews with other people, just kind of spreading this knowledge, because the energy, especially our energy of me and my partner, has definitely been expanding, especially this year, expanding and accelerating, where our energy and our message is reaching a much broader audience. And it's a really good thing, I see,
No, that's awesome, actually. With regard to what you said, I deal with practitioners from all over the world. I deal with spiritual groups from all over the world. And over the years, prior to 2019, as an example, they were saying different things. This year, they're all saying the same things. And that really does strike me as odd. So much so that we built a community to pull all of them into one place so that they could start speaking meaningfully to each other. So from the Caribbean and so on, everybody's saying the same thing. Some of it good and some of it not so good. A lot of people are waking up to certain kinds of realities. So the first thing that I want to ask, I suppose, is take us on a walkthrough of the different races and so on that are galactic races, so that we can get an understanding, because we have an audience that is in a spectrum, from people who never heard about this at all, but are willing to understand, right? They want their minds open because things are happening for them. And then we have people who are very deep into the galactic community. So if you could just take us on a walkthrough of that, that would be really much appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. So I've had a couple of them approach me and my partner in the last 3 months more than any other time. So we did a Lionsgate portal last month on the 8/8, where we were channeling different galactic beings that were coming through. And the first thing I want to say is that the galactics are basically, if you think of any animal or creature that's on Earth, there's an evolved form of it, out there in other planets, and they have an evolved consciousness. So, for example, the Lyrans, right? The cat people, the feline race, they look just like many of the cats on Earth, but in an evolved form. They're like standing upright. So many of the Lyrans are coming through, especially the lion tribe ones. Those are the ones that have been coming through a lot, very, very strongly. Also, there have been, this might sound funny, but the rhinoceros ones have been coming through. Also, the peacock ETs have been coming through for me. And a lot of Pleiadians. I've been working with a lot of Pleiadians, many Arcturians, especially many of them from the many different councils. So that's been coming through as well. And many of the Syrians and the Blue Avians have been coming through too. So each group have a particular message for humanity because many people are from those different races. And so each message will provide a certain level of activation for people. People will resonate with certain messages on different levels, depending on what they're connected to. And so the Blue Avians, for example, they are, the one thing that I felt that they were bringing forward is a message for people to connect more with their psychic vision. So that one is very, very important because people do need to foster a deeper connection with their own psychic abilities so that they can learn how to perceive energy correctly, and that they can learn how to understand the spiritual reality that's happening around them, so they can learn how to discern energies that are coming through people. Because the biggest thing in being deceived is you not being able to perceive the deception in front of you, or a person who has deceptive tendencies. And so this is very intuition and third eye related. And so with the third eye being closed, you can't see the energies and the frequencies coming out of someone who may seemingly be speaking the truth, And so the Blue Avians are really encouraging people to connect with their psychic insight and their third eye to be able to see what's actually going on, So that's one thing, because a lot of this is rooted in learning how to perceive deception, because that is a big topic of discussion lately.
We're going to get into that discussion. We are definitely going to get into the discussion, because that word discernment is a very, very loaded word. It used to be a very simple word, but in today's world, discernment it occurs at so many levels of discernment.
Yeah.
I'm going to toss this to you because I have a lot of questions to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I really love your life path, and this will resonate true with so many of the people who are on the path of light, let's just say, on the path of righteousness and the highest good of all. We all seem to have the same dynamics, although the particulars of our story, of our journey may be slightly different, but that seems to be common with a lot of people. And so this discussion is going to ring true for so many of us. And now I'd like to focus on that key word, discernment. That is so important. So I think it would be really beneficial for our esteemed audience if we focus a little bit more on that discernment. For example, you mentioned the energetic, let's just say, flavor of the truth, and vice versa, the energetic flavor of deception. And also how people could strengthen their knowingness. You mentioned tuning into their own psychic ability. How would one go about that? So we would like to present our dear audience with practical tips that they could actually use to their benefit.
Yes,
So I would
and to their
appreciate if
safety
you.
as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I want to talk about is how people are perceiving what discernment even means. So discernment for some people, people have like different layers of discernment levels, right? So the most surface layer that people have is, what the person is saying. So if someone is speaking some level of truth, people
Mhm.
would be like, okay, yeah, I can trust them. That's the very first level. And this is where this is the trap that most people fall into, because their level of discernment, as long as they're saying one or two things that they already know and resonate with, then they begin to listen to the person and be open more to what the person has to say. And so that's one level of discernment. The other level of discernment, honestly, is how people look, their physical appearance, And I've met a
Yep.
lot of people who are very, if the person is, and I mean, this is kind of funny, but people's aesthetics has a lot to do with how people receive them. And there are many, I should say, good-looking people that are very deceptive, you know what I mean? And people just kind of read that surface and be like, okay, this person must be speaking the truth. I'd say that's probably the most shallow one right there, And then it goes into if they're speaking something that they already resonate with. And
It's like Kim Kardashian can't lie. She must know how to go about life. Correct. I get it.
yeah, so
That's so true. So if you're, for example, wearing a nice suit, an expensive suit, nice
yeah,
silk tie, for
More
example,
credible.
people,
Correct.
you look more
presentation.
credible.
People are very convinced by presentation. The way you present yourself has a big psychological effect on how people receive you. It really does, And so people need to look beyond the presentation, beyond what the person is even saying, beyond how the person looks. They need to look past the 3D, bullshit a lot of times that people put up, and to be able to get in touch with their intuition. And another thing that people do is that if what someone is saying can be corroborated or validated by research, then in their mind is also true. And so that is another, and while I understand that mentality, right, having to corroborate information with like research, and then that becomes someone's truth and how they validate certain information, I understand it from a logical perspective, but that can also be a trap where it could just be the same regurgitation of information, you know what I'm saying? And because so many people are saying the same thing, then in many people's minds that it must be true, but it could all be
This is
false
exactly what
stuff.
we talked about when we said the man in the white lab coat is not always correct.
So it's like a dogma existing in academia for a certain number of decades. All the researchers believe in the same fallacy, but they all back each other up. So if you go read some research, you find they're all talking the same nonsense. So it must be true.
Exactly. And so people take that as corroborating evidence, and in their minds, then it must be true. And so that's another thing that people need to learn how to, I guess, master, or move through, or see through it. So the way that people can begin discerning people speaking and the information that's coming through them is basically to ask themselves a couple of questions, especially when it's regarding, galactic history or even spiritual concepts, right? So one thing that people need to ask themselves, first of all, is this information even relevant to me in my spiritual growth? That's the first thing. Is it even relevant for you to even be ingesting that information? Does it have anything to do with anything in your life at all? If it doesn't, then there's no reason why you need to be ingesting it unless you want to. But what that does is that people fall into information overload, where they ingest a bunch of information that many times has nothing to do with their personal growth. It's not something that they can actually utilize so that they can actually, improve themselves in any practical way. It's just like, oh, wow, that sounds cool, And so the other question that people can ask is are they ingesting information because they don't want to feel like they're being left out of the loop? That's another one. People don't want to feel like they're uninformed. No one wants to feel like they don't know what's going on.
It's the FOMO thing. It's the fear of missing out.
Yeah, the fear of missing out on what's going on. So many people are driven by this fear, and so they open themselves up to all kinds of information, whether it's true or false. They don't even know how to discern whether it's true or false. It's just information, because there's an intellectual trap that people fall into, where the more information they have, then it provides a sense of safety, because it convinces them that they're in the know and they're not being left out. But what happens is that their consciousness and their subconscious is being filled with so much stuff that they can't even properly energetically digest or even utilize for themselves, and it's just backed up stuff, junk that's just there, And so what people can start doing is, start asking yourself these questions, and any information that you come across, it doesn't matter how it sounds or how the person is presenting it, ignore the presentation. The presentation, I get it. Sometimes it can seem, it can have this wow factor to it, the way people word things, because words can be very manipulative, and people can be very manipulative with words, because, everyone's trying to draw an audience, you know what I'm saying? And so people need to look beyond the presentation and how the person looks and what they're saying, and even the kind of wording that they're using, and actually start asking themselves these questions, like, really. And this is how people can begin to break down the information that they're reading, and to understand what is actually for them to utilize and what isn't. And what people will find in most cases, that most of the information that they're ingesting, they can just throw away because it has nothing to do with them. And so this is how people can begin to reconnect with themselves on a deeper level. And also another thing I wanted to mention is the identity that people form because of the many different things that they're ingesting. So a lot of the information that people speak has a lot to do with certain, like maybe like a lineage or like a bloodline or like some kind of spiritual identity or something. And people would be like, oh man, I like that. And they attach themselves to a particular, something that's being talked about, and they become personally identified with what the person is saying, and so they create some kind of identity and, and an emotional attachment to it. And that makes it more difficult for people to ask themselves these questions, So that makes it a lot more difficult for people to discern properly the information that's coming through. So that's not to say that people don't actually resonate with some information, because some people actually do, but there is a lot of confusion with the word resonance versus something that is captivating you on a surface level. So that's something that people need to discern properly. What's actually attracting them to the information? Is it the surface presentation, or is it something deeper, energetic happening that is creating resonance, that people say a lot, And so, yeah.
No, I have to confess, my experience with, some of the people that I've met in the Galactic community has not always been positive. I just want to take a strip off of what you just said there. A lot of people derive pride out of being associated with a particular identity or particular race, or whatever the case may be. And and it comes across when they speak. And so from the psychotherapeutic perspective, I can understand that they believe in they believe that they are this identity. They may have received confirmation, and regardless of whether you receive confirmation, there's a psychotherapeutic tool that I use to determine whether or not the individual needs the identity as opposed to is connecting with the identity. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
Because some people, the identity that they form, they need it. And that is why you go down one of those traps that you were talking about in our private discussion, what we call an enlightenment trap. Yes?
Yes.
And so how do you get people out of the enlightenment trap? Because people hold so firmly to these identities and so on. And the identities, some of them, they didn't actually make the connection themselves. Someone else told it to them. And so they're firmly locked in.
It's really interesting what you gentleman just said, that whole identity thing. So we've seen it in the 3D domain, where you can change somebody's identity and motivate them to go to war. Where previously people were brothers, then by that change of identity, more specifically, that limitation of identity, that turning you into a group and them into the other, you see how conflict is created.
Division and that conflict, yes.
A certain identity, just because it is galactic, it is still limiting, right? You're putting people into little boxes, which makes it easier to divide and conquer, put people into conflict with each other. Well, really, when you look at the true essence of what spiritual growth is, your identity must be expanded. And here comes the name of our movement, Universal Citizen, which is what we're all. We're all cosmic, and that should be our identity. We are everyone and everything everywhere, and that is our identity. Once everything is part of you, you don't need a moral code. You treat everybody as if it is part of yourself.
Right. I get where you're coming with that, Amir. I suppose my question is, how do you, for people who have developed, and I don't want to put it this way, that identity need, the neediness for a certain identity, is a lot of it is because they're in particular situations in the 3D domain that they want to escape from. And so they run to an identity which is higher than, and most identities generally tend to give people an escape or an out from what they're actually experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for individuals who are afflicted with this particular kind of, I wouldn't call it a malaise, I would probably call it just an identity trap, so to speak. What can the average person do? Because even in the spiritual community, we have people with those identity traps and so on. How do you get them to discern that at the end of it all, when all is said and done, you have this identity, but you still have to function with the rest of the community. You still have to function with them. And it usually helps not to function with them from a condescending point of view.
Yeah. So what I want to start off by saying is that, we all have an ego, right? And so in order to function within this reality, we have to have a healthy relationship with our ego. Mm-hmm. And so the ego is the part of us that seeks to identify with something so that we can, I guess, figure out how to function in just society and, reality and just in general, there is a problem of over-identification in this community where people, they begin to hold on to these identities of themselves, whether it's by someone else or whether something that they received on their own through their own meditations or whatever. They begin to over-identify with it, where they begin to dissociate from the 3D. And what happens with that is that they begin to, even alter their own personality, their own way of expression to accommodate this identity or what they think they need to do to accommodate this identity. And what that tends to do is that it harms, it negatively impacts their ability to be a normal functioning human being. And so I've met a lot of people like that who they over-identify with a bunch of spiritual, titles and labels, and they can't even hold a regular conversation, or they can't like their responsibilities in a natural, they have no organization, in their life. Their lives are usually very chaotic. They don't, raise their children correctly, or some parts of their life they're not handling in the way that they should, because they're over identifying with this identity or higher identity of themselves. And so what people need to do, like, I understand that people have different inclinations or different I guess intuitive or psychic perceptions of themselves, right? It could be, because people have many different kinds of connections. People have angelic connections, extraterrestrial connections, and all kinds of stuff. And those things are actually real. People are connected to a lot of these different things. And it's important for people to explore these connections and what that means for them, but they need to integrate it properly. So there is a problem with a lack of integration. So people receive the knowledge of these connections that they have, and they let it go up to their head where it begins to unground them, and then it negatively impacts their ability to function. So what people need to do is learn to ground themselves and not over-identify with these things that they're receiving, and also to develop some kind of meditation practice so that they can be able to discern, and begin to understand who and what they are in the, in this reality, because there is just a lot of identities out there. And I can understand how this can be very limiting for many people, I guess, in a perceptual sense. But I have found that certain messages from certain extraterrestrial groups or certain, spiritual embodiments, like, for example, many people are very angelic in their energy, and that's not to put like a cap or a limit on themselves, but there is an aspect to their energy that they embody that form of energy, but people are very multidimensional, where there are many kinds of spiritual beings that people can embody all at once, and so in that way, people are very expansive and very multidimensional. But the main problem, again, is the lack of integration. Because when you don't integrate things properly, when you don't have a grounding practice or a proper meditation practice or a proper shadow work, really, if people don't, integrate their shadows and learn how to deal and heal their own woundings with abandonment, that's a big thing that makes people attached to these identities so hard is abandonment and rejection. Those are the two main culprits for why people do this. So people need to create a practice so that they can properly integrate and heal these wounds, and so they will be able to integrate the information that they're receiving and understand how it relates to them and how it doesn't relate to them. And so they can, integrate that more into the 3D so that they can be normally functioning people, but with a higher awareness of who they are,
No, understood.
If that makes sense.
that came across very well. So I suppose we should do the next side of the equation. And so what about the galactic history community? We have people who are galactic readers, so to speak, right? Which is another form of psychic awareness. If someone comes to you and the person is having an existential crisis, as an example, is it within your scope of practice and so on to overlay an identity on them, because it can cause that individual to go sideways?
So with these people who are talking a lot about galactic history, and there's many of them. What I have seen with working with certain people is that they carry a certain energy about them, like galactic, scholars, galactic librarians, galactic, akashic record keepers. So these are the different names that come forward, that identifies what someone, or a part of what someone does. So with many of these people, not all of them, many of them are actual akashic, or should I say galactic scholars, even in a higher dimensional sense. And so that energy is being channeled down from this higher version of who they are. And so they're putting out galactic history. Now, whether it's true or not, that's something else, So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're posting actual, accurate information. It just means that they are tapped into a part of themselves that I guess that records certain and reports on certain things that have happened throughout galactic history. Now, the thing is that there is an awakening right now, and then explosions of many galactic historians. And what I'm seeing that's happening too, or what needs to happen, is that even they need to integrate, or they need to understand the deeper reason why they are in that position in the first place. And I'm talking about the good people. The bad ones are something else. So the good ones who are posting about galactic history, whether it's true or not, they need to understand that there is a higher galactic aspect of them that is doing that already, and that they're just tuning into that, but they need to integrate that further and gain a little bit more understanding, and so that they can more accurately present galactic history. So many of them are researchers. Many of them, they just research and compile a bunch of information that's already out there. But there's a few of them who do research, but they also combine it with their own psychic abilities. And I resonate more with the ones who combine it more with their psychic abilities, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and it's easy to get into many misleading rabbit holes of, what people think happened, and, things like that. So I feel like there needs to be a greater discernment with many of these galactic historians, where I feel like they need to connect deeper with spirit. They need to connect deeper with their higher selves, so that they can begin to channel information that's more in resonance with truth, because a lot of them are just regurgitating the same information. I'm not hearing anything new at all. It's all the same thing with a different twist, and so that shows me that not many of them are really like actually tuned in to, the rest of what is out there to tap into, and so because there's a safety in regurgitating the same information, because if you come with something new, you're gonna be, scrutinized, and not many people want to be under that kind of lens, And so there's that as well. I'm one of them who I will be posting a lot about galactic history. I've done a little bit of it, but I'm going to be doing that a lot more often now, because there's a lot of misinformation about a lot of things, that I have been receiving, and I'm going to be posting a lot about galactic history in the near future. But yeah, that's my take on that.
No, that's excellent. That's a wonderful thing. So I suppose my question, here's the problem. This particular community, galactic history community, is very complex.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reasons why a lot of people who are into spiritual work of any kind, whether they be psychics, whether they be shamans, shamanic people, and whether they be even witches and so on, they don't step into that arena, specifically because it's like very complex and so many people saying different things. I will give you an example of what I'm talking about. So the Queen died today. We're recording this on the day that the Queen has died. And before she died, a galactic historian, famous one, made a recording and posted it to YouTube before she died with the caption, that reptilian hag is gone. Yeah, she did. So I could say there are a few things that I agree with on the 3D level, but you do have some outliers in the galactic history community that, yeah, from the outside it's looking like there's a lack of empathy there, even though what she is saying in her actual, I suppose the title was clickbait, but people penalize you on clickbait anyway, right? But what she was saying was actually very logical, and her logic process was fine. However, the clickbait title generally tends to like shock, and yeah, people are hesitant. Like galactic history is a very interesting subject matter, and I think that anybody who's doing any kind of spiritual work, it's worth actually looking into it, even if it's just from the cerebral construct, right? Yeah. Because if you look into it, you can actually learn a little bit more about what you are experiencing from a psychic point of view, right? This is my belief system. And I just want to clear the air here on air. For those of you who are watching this, who are from secret societies, and you all know who you all are, as I'm speaking to you guys, a lot of your information, the alphabets that you actually learn to do the rituals that you are doing, they're not from this planet. Like, hello, you learn celestial writing for a reason, okay? So I want you to listen to what this man is saying, because what he's saying is actually pertinent, especially in this time that we're living in, when a lot of people are waking up to different aspects of themselves. We saw an awakening. These last 2 or 3 years have been quite interesting from a certain point of view. It either sent people crazy or it woke them up. These are 2 things that are happening. In the last 3 days or so, just around where I live, okay, there has been a mass murder. I live in Canada, for those of you who don't know. There's been a mass murder and so on. It's either sent people crazy, and they're still going crazy to this day, so the world is different that we live in, or it woke them up. And I see a lot of people waking up, but by that same token, I want to talk about brainwashing. What about the people that aren't waking up? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment real quick on the Queen dying. So I wrote a post on Facebook right before getting on this call, and that like blew up already. So I was, because I was seeing many people sympathizing with her soul and sending her love and all this stuff, and I was just like, what? So, because we have the compassion people, you know what I mean? And so I was receiving something a couple of days ago with a lot of this like royal energy that's coming through, and because many people have been awakening to their connection with like royal lineages, whether it's past life related, or whether it's off planet, or whether it's celestial royal lineage, and things like that. And so there's been an awakening of a lot of that royal energy on many different levels and dimensions. And so when the Queen dying, whether she died last year or whenever it was, but the announcement of it, the timing of the announcement is very synchronistic, because tomorrow is the 9/9 portal, right? That everyone talks about. And that portal it has to do with a lot of that royal, or should I say the celestial royal energy coming back on the planet. And so with her dying, it signified the old reptilian monarchy collapsing, and so that is creating this new wave of energy that's coming through right now, where there's a lot of healing that's coming through for the collective, for many people who have lived past lives, in all of these royal families, all of these like empires throughout the history of the planet, right? Many of these empires have fallen because of infiltration or, whatever else has happened to them. And many people have lived past lives being, say, in some kind of royal status, and they've held the trauma of that time, or whether it's off planet or anything like that. And so there's this original wave of royal energy that's just coming through and healing a lot of these people, and also awakening those people who have that royalty within their DNA, within their codes, within their spiritual, energy. And so there's a layer of awakening of that as well, is what I've been noticing. So yeah. So can you repeat your question again that you asked?
No, you answered the first part of my question. My second part of my question is, and the people who are stuck, the brainwashed, and I call them brainwashed, and I'll explain why I call them brainwashed to you. Here is my feeling on the subject. We all have to wake up. A lot of people outsource their healing and their realizations to someone else. Therein lies the danger. Because a lot of people are codependent on healers and so on. They don't develop their own innate abilities as such. So in the best case scenario, they're going to meet somebody who will genuinely try to bring the best out of them. Say, you can do this. You got this. Okay? In the worst case scenario, they're going to meet somebody who is extremely skilled at manipulative tactics, which will embed a codependent relationship upon them, whereby you can't do anything unless I tell you to do it. And so this is hard for me because I see this a lot, right? Where embedded inside their consciousness is this thing that, and they don't say, well, this is my master, but that's exactly what it is. This is exactly what it is. And I say this in all honesty. If you find yourself introducing yourself to someone saying, well, so-and-so, I went to so-and-so, or so-and-so said that I should do this.
Right.
If you are that person that introduces yourself like that, right? It's not, hi, my name is, no, hi, I went to so-and-so and he told me this or she told me that, or whatever the case may be. If you are that person, I want you to listen to this broadcast because we're talking to you. It's kind of like when you go in corporate circles, when people introduce themselves by their CV. I asked you, hi, what's your name? I did not ask you what job you have, what salary you make, or whatever else. But a lot of people in the spiritual community, what it looks like is that I went to the Dalai Lama and he told me this. I went to this psychic and he told me this. And I went to this healer and she told me that. And this is what it looks like. Antonio, I wanted you to speak on that because I'm sure that you have seen this kind of dynamic and what it looks like from a psychotherapeutic point of view. When I analyze the individual, that individual's identity does not exist without the individual who overlaid their influence on their personality.
Yeah. So I've seen that constantly throughout my involvement in the spiritual and the galactic community, and I continue to see it to this day. It used to bother me a whole lot more than it does now, but I've realized that even like these people who they accept identities or things being told from other people, like, for example, their mentors. A lot of people say, oh, well, my mentor said this, my mentor said that, or a psychic told me this, a psychic told me that, and so these people who do that, what I've realized is that, to an extent, they need to go through that process, and eventually, these people are going to have their own awakening. Like, I've seen many of these people have a complete transformation from being dependent on someone else to tell them who they are or what's going on, to them standing in their power. And what generally happens is that, unfortunately, they need to get hurt by some people, because sometimes that is the catalyst to their awakening, because if they don't have some kind of sting, something to slap them in the face, they're not going to wake up to their own sovereignty, So unfortunately, even though as much as I don't like people being deceived and being hurt, sometimes that's what other people need in order to awaken to their own power, their own sovereignty, and to learn how to stand in their own, in their own energy. You know what I mean? Because that builds a lot of strength and character within people. Also, just being around people that motivates them and encourages them to connect with themselves. That's also a big help, and that's what can help people move out of the mentality of relying on someone else into actually becoming sovereign. So this is a sovereignty issue, and because everyone is looking for truth, everyone is looking for that deep soul resonance within themselves. And so sometimes at the beginning of some people's journeys, they're just following other people, and eventually they have their own awakening by getting slapped around, unfortunately, by other leaders and just other experiences that makes them, wake up and be like, hey, I can tap in for myself, or, I don't need anyone to lead me into anything. I can do this myself. I can receive the messages myself. I can, guide myself. And so this is like the understanding that everyone needs to come into eventually. And unfortunately, the only way that I've seen it is through going through some bad experiences. Unfortunately, that route also causes many people to get hurt to an extent where they don't even recover. So that's the unfortunate side of it, but the good side of that is that people do wake up and they do begin to step into their own sovereignty, because when someone is heavily invested in what someone else is telling them, they don't really listen to anything else, and sometimes they need something to shock them out of that mentality.
It's kind of funny. Amir and I do a show, UCM VIP. Every week we say, you guys have to take charge of your own self. We don't use the word sovereignty. We say you don't outsource your healing. You don't outsource your development, your self-development to someone else. You got to do the work. You absolutely do. And it goes over everybody's heads. Like, it's right, not everybody. Some people actually do wake up. But here's the thing that I want to say with regard to this dynamic. There are two inherent problems there that I see. One is cross-contamination.
Yeah.
And cross-contamination works like this. I have outsourced my healing to somebody else. I bring somebody else to outsource their healing to somebody else and tell them, this is the way. And so the person says, well, it's in our nature. A lot of our natures in this 3D environment that we live in. The road, the easiest road is the road that we're going to go down, right? It's just right there. Not all of us will take that road. Some of us will take the hard road, because standing in sovereignty means a lot of work, a lot of pain, and a lot of heartache. It's blood, sweat, and tears. And sometimes that's very literal. Okay. We started off this broadcast, this interview, speaking about Antonio's background in a Christian setting. And then you have people like me that actually went and study it. So I was all in for to a certain extent. Well, actually not all in, because my brain wouldn't let it rest. And I can tell you that it took a number of incidents for me to suddenly realize, oh, this is not right.
Something is wrong. Exactly.
And I can give you my experience, because I went to Catholic school. At the time that I went to Catholic school, we had a situation where the school was secular, which means there's no sectarian influence in the school, which means that if the school is having a mass, as an example, you can opt out of going to the mass. I opted out of going to the mass in full rights, right, as a citizen of that country. I got a years-long detention, a year long. Would you like to know what my detention entailed?
Wow. Yeah.
A year-long detention. Would you like to know? I was sequestered, right, to the library, right? And it's a library full of religious books. But that was the best thing that ever happened. Because there was a man inside there. His name was Father Clovis, and he taught me Latin. And that was the worst thing that he could have done. The worst thing that you could do. Because when you learn Latin, you understand stuff. So I had to read and so on. And then you find out little things like, oh, did you know that the Christian church believed in reincarnation? Did you know that? Did you know this stuff? Right? They believed in reincarnation. The original church that you call Catholic, they believed in reincarnation. They absolutely did. They believed in a whole bunch of things. And then they realized, yo, this doesn't actually help our bottom line. Sorry. And then Pope Gregory was the one who just struck out a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, if they believe that they have more than one choice, more than one chance, then they're not going to obey. Right? So they struck that off. Can you imagine believing that, yeah, I could get this right the next time around, right? No, you're going to strike that off. These are the facts that people don't know. It took a little while, but it took punishment, blood, sweat, and tears for me to wake up and realize, you know, you gotta do this work yourself and stop emulating and putting people on a pedestal just so that you can outsource your development to them. So I suppose you are right to an extent, Antonio, because what it does is that people generally tend not to believe that they can do it, so they put it on to someone else. But then there's the cross-contamination factor. People who would have gotten up anyway, they say, no, don't get up. I got somebody for you. Okay? I have somebody for you. And therein lies the problem of the contagion that spreads.
Yeah.
There's another issue about critical thinking, that people who are, again, let's use the analogy of drinking the Kool-Aid. Mm-hmm. They just go along with a certain amount of information presented to them without actually asking, okay, does this ring true? It doesn't require awakened psychic abilities. It just requires a healthy mind.
Correct.
To put 2 and 2 together, see it adds up to 5 in what they've been told. You just have to evaluate that stuff. And once the first brick comes down, then comes down the whole tower.
Yeah, but they have to see that first brick, though.
That's right. It's that critical thinking, that questioning of the information. So-and-so told me this. They take it as truth without evaluating, does this actually make any sense?
The point of this whole journey is to connect with yourself, you know? So that's what I do primarily, especially in my courses, is I guide people on connecting with their own intuition, with their own voice, and with their own psychic abilities, so they can learn to perceive, like, first understand themselves, you know, first and foremost, understand their own tendencies, understanding their own mind, their own subconscious thinking, and what's happening, what's playing in the back of their subconscious. Because a lot of people, they don't know how to identify what's playing in the back of their minds, you know. And so people need to, and that's what meditation does. It helps pull the subconscious conversations that people are having into the conscious, so they can begin identifying what they're telling themselves, you know, on a day-to-day basis. Because everyone's always having a conversation with themselves, you know, subconsciously. Me, I talk to myself all goddamn day, consciously, you know. So my partner would be like, who are you talking to? I'm like, myself, you know. So I do that a lot, you know, and this is why I embody myself in the way that I do because I'm always talking to myself. There's always these parts of me that's having conversations with my own self. And so I would invite people to, talk to yourself, talk to the different parts of your mind that it's saying, like those little whispers that you hear in the back of your mind. The more you focus on that, the louder it will get. And the more you will begin to understand the many layers of how your mind
Excellent.
works.
Correct. Correct.
So that's implementing shamanic and modern psychological healing techniques on one's own self.
Yeah.
Exactly the process you described, Antonio. So we can do this for ourselves.
Exactly.
And that's called meditation.
Not
to be done in the bedroom or the bathroom or the toilet or the kitchen.
A meditation, it doesn't have to be, sitting in a lotus pose or something. You can be meditating while you're doing house chores or while you're going, running errands, or when you're doing something. As long as you're in a state of mindfulness of like what you're doing, and connecting with yourself mindfully, then that is a form of meditation as well.
When I was practicing, I always had the idea that you practice any kind of healing science. It doesn't matter whether it's traditional healing science or esoteric healing science. You practice healing science to make yourself redundant. You do that to make yourself redundant. It's one of those zero-sum game professions, okay? Because there's a million people out there that need healing. And if one person is coming to you for the last 12 years, 12. Okay. And they want the same thing, which is healing. There are two things that are going on there. They're not taking responsibility and not following your advice, typically. Or they've developed a codependent relationship with you. At that point in time, you have two choices. Two choices. You're going to have to implement a system whereby you have to do this thing to stand up, right? You have to do this, right? And you need to be able, in your integrity, to cut that person off. And I've had to do that.
Yeah.
I have had to do that. But I think what gets in the way of a lot of people is the money. Listen. There is no Hippocratic oath, as I said in one of my broadcasts for esoteric practitioners, but there really should be, because your Hippocratic oath started when you decided that you are going to practice and help other people, especially in that integral sense. You go deeper than a surgeon. Your standard has to be a little bit higher, not less. Your standard has to be higher. It's like the local priest down the road, as an example. He's dealing with people's souls, theoretically, or as the case may be. The standard for him has to be higher. And it's not different for you guys who are practicing esoteric science on people. The standard has to be higher. And so when you have an individual who you don't have to think, because a lot of people, all the people who practice this, they develop some sense of intellect. It's a byproduct of the meditation that you do. If you know at your innermost level that this individual has developed a codependent relationship with you based on I give you money, you give me your attention. No healing is going on there after that. Exactly. Is my point. You are actually making that person sicker if you continue doing that. Bingo. So I don't know how people resolve this, because there is the money factor. Well, they're paying, I'll take their money.
Right. But then it should be advertised as so. So the key word here is healing, meaning identifying the root of whatever the problem is, addressing the cause, resolving it so the person becomes balanced and healthy.
Yeah.
That's healing.
Yeah.
And if you go any other way, you've become an alternative to aspirin, a painkiller.
Yeah.
Right? You're an expensive form of aspirin. You're not a healer anymore.
Yeah, so what I do is something very similar to where, let's say somebody, for example, like I deal with a lot of very extreme cases with demonic entities. That's and some people, I mean, some crazy stories, man, of some people becoming like physically ill and having nightmares and can't sleep and all kinds of things just scratching them in their body. I mean, some horrible
Yes.
stories, you know? And it's like because I have services where I remove these things for people, but there is a self-healing component to it where I always give people some tips and advice on how to keep themselves,
Ah,
clear on how to, I basically channel any messages that they need, like, hey, like this is what you're doing that's opening you up to this and this and that. Maybe you can change this by doing this and this and that, or incorporating something into your daily life so that you can shift the energy, so that you stop attracting whatever it is that you're attracting.
and
That's
that is what
yeah.
I mean. That is what is called aftercare. That is the
Yes.
counseling part and the grunge work that is missing out. Because a lot of people will not do that. You want something removed, I'll remove it. That's it.
Yeah.
And there is no
Yeah.
aftercare because let me tell you, if you have an entity that's riding somebody, and I've seen depossessions done, and even people in the clergy, you guys are guilty of that as well. If you're watching this broadcast, we have a couple of actual priests that are watching our broadcast. In case you didn't know, Amir, hi. Yeah, you don't want to say hello, right? So if you are watching this, even the clergy has a problem with that. They do not do aftercare. Come on, guys, you have to, because if you think being attacked by a human is traumatic, no, no. Demonic possession is extremely traumatic, physically, mentally, and so on. The PTSD from that will actually drive them back into the same place that they came from.
Yeah.
Because the fear is intense after that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like people, what I do, especially those who have services with me to remove certain things, there is a component of me teaching them or giving them ideas of how to protect their own energy field. So there is the knowledge of learning how to shield their energies, habits. It could be maybe, hey, maybe you can use crystals, maybe you can use this and this and that, but it's always specific to what that person, could benefit from, and so there's always a component, or there always needs to be a component of honoring someone's own sovereignty, right? And every work that I do and that people should do in general has to have that component, in my opinion, where you can provide the service, but also have it where you can, guide them on how to basically maintain their own healing, or how to, just how to connect with themselves deeper so that these things don't happen, again, and things like that. And so, like, this is why I do a lot of mentorship courses, because a lot of people want to learn how to do things themselves. They don't just want things done for them. And
Right.
and I prefer to work with people like that, who don't
Yes.
want things to be done for them. They want to learn how to do it themselves.
Excellent.
And that is the true healing. So there's
Yeah.
an element of you assisting the process in the beginning, but you're also
Facilitating.
bestowing
That's it. Yeah.
knowledge. Yes, that knowledge. Okay, dear client, dear sir, dear madam, you're out of balance. Let's help you move into balance. And oh, by the way, this is what you've been doing that has been knocking you off balance. And all
Exactly.
right, here's some tools that fit you uniquely very well to maintain this state of
Yeah.
balance and health. And
Yeah.
that's the definition of a true healer.
And it's very simple, but another thing I find that's really disheartening is people, they are very comfortable being told, or they are very comfortable with people doing things for them. People don't many of them I find they don't want to do the work. They just want to lay on their backs and have everyone just, spoon feed them everything. And there's a lot of people like that. And I don't like working with people like that. I find it honestly very annoying.
Exhausting even. Yes. I mean,
To be
how many
honest.
times do I have to tell you the same thing, dude? Please take it on
Exactly,
board.
exactly.
I
I
mean,
I have a lot of people who sometimes come to me repeatedly and be like, "Hey, I was receiving this information for myself. Is this accurate?" I'm like, well, "Why are you asking me?" It's like check with yourself, check with your intuition, And it's like, but a lot of it is really trauma based where because there's this inherent trauma within the human collective of not trusting themselves. It's a battle, man. Like I've battled not trusting myself for a long time, and it is a really hard battle to win over because it's so deeply embedded in the subconscious, to doubt yourself, to not trust in your own ability to maintain yourself or to walk your own path. You know what I mean? So I understand how hard of a battle that can be, but at the same time, we all have the ability to do it, So,
absolutely. And I really resonate strongly with what you just said. There is no one out here in a position of power that is within us. It is our birthright. But there's none of us here in that position of power that hasn't fought these battles.
Correct.
And by goodness, they're painful, okay? But it's a healing pain.
Yeah.
So to our esteemed audience, ladies and gentlemen, please, please don't fear the pain. The fear is worse than the pain. That fear is worse than death itself. Stand up, say, come at me. Whatever you're going to do, come do it. Let's see what you've got.
And
see that.
now I have Don't Fear the Reaper playing in my head. No, never mind.
Don't fear the
Now I have Don't Fear the Reaper playing in my head.
As the Reaper approaches happily, Macarena, yeah? Oh, Macarena, come at me, baby. Let's yes?
Listen, here's the guys, we come to the end of our broadcast. Antonio, I want you to tell us about your services, your contact, where to find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So my website is thesunconsciousness.com. There you'll find my Facebook link and my Instagram and every other place that you can find me at. I'm including my YouTube channel. So I'm mostly active on Facebook and YouTube. So you can just follow me there or, friend request me and just keep up to date with everything that I'm posting out there, So I also provide a lot of different services. I do readings, I do energy clearings, I do mentorship courses, helping people develop the connection with their own intuition and their psychic abilities and to be able to connect with their own spirit guides so that they can, become more self-sustaining, in a just personal sense overall, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And I also share just a lot of, truth that comes forward through my own connections as well. So to, help enlightened people on things, and yeah, so that's pretty much what I do.
Okay, we have an offer to extend to you more than an invitation. We've built an online community where we're pulling people from the spiritual communities all over the world into one place. Antonio, we're going to send you an invite link if you want to just come in, because we have filtered out Facebook's ads and stuff like that, and there's only going to be spirituality happening inside of there, right? A lot of people probably need to hear what you have to say. Absolutely. I think this is a good thing. This is one of the very few times in history in my life that I've actually found spiritual people actually saying the same things and agreeing on what's going on in the world. And I find that very odd. Communities and groups from Saudi Arabia to the Caribbean are saying the same things. No. And they're interpreting them the same way, especially what is happening in 2022. A lot of things happen in 2022, but it's having them synchronized like that is a very weird thing. And the only way that we're going to actually get some sort of resolution or whatever else as to what really is going on is if people start talking to each other. So we're going to start you guys talking to each other. Amir, you have the last word as usual. Go ahead.
So, Antonio, thank you so much. I mean, this was an incredible conversation. By the way, we would love for you to come back. This is just number 1, my friend. Let's number 9 and 10 and 15.
This has been a good interview. It absolutely has been.
Yes. And our esteemed audience, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put all the links to how to get in touch with Antonio beneath our video so you can easily find him. And thank you so much, my dear friend. We really appreciate what you do. You're a beacon of light in this crazy, crazy world. More power to you, my friend. And now I pass it on to you for the closing words. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure being here. And I just want to wish everybody a safe as possible awakening process. So that's it.
All right, guys. Anyway, guys, for those of you who don't know, who don't have the link, we're going to drop the link in the description below to join the community or join our video site and so on. And whenever you guys need any information as to how to get in touch with Antonio, if you didn't get it, it's thesunconsciousness.com. And if you don't remember it, you can DM myself or Amir, but we're going to drop the link down below. All right, guys. See you guys later. Bye-bye.